For most of my life, I carried a belief that felt so obvious I never questioned it. It followed me quietly, like background music you stop noticing until it suddenly gets very loud. It showed up when I stared at unfinished tasks, when I opened my laptop and felt tired before doing anything, when I promised myself, honestly and with great conviction, that today would be different, and then watched the exact same pattern unfold anyway. I thought I was lazy, not carefree lazy, not relaxed lazy. The confusing kind. The kind where you want to do things deeply, passionately, aggressively, and still somehow end the day exhausted, overwhelmed, and wondering how nothing got done. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And while you are listening, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. If you have ever been called lazy, unmotivated, or full of potential, welcome. You are among friends. I did not wake up one morning and decide I was lazy. This belief was carefully constructed over time, brick by brick, missed deadlines, forgotten plans, half-finished projects. The strange experience of caring intensely about something while being completely unable to start it. Eventually, it felt easier to accept the label than to keep searching for an explanation that never seemed to appear. I watched other people do things that looked simple. They sat down and started working without a warm-up routine that involved pacing the room, checking messages, making coffee, forgetting the coffee, scrolling for a minute, reconsidering their entire life direction, and then checking the time in mild panic. They completed tasks in neat, predictable steps. They finished things calmly, casually, without turning it into a full psychological event. Meanwhile, I could turn a single email into a 3-hour emotional saga. I could open a document, stare at it, feel overwhelmed, and somehow end up reorganizing a drawer I did not even know I owned. I could feel busy all day and still accomplish nothing measurable. I could be exhausted without having done anything that justified the exhaustion. Naturally, I assumed the difference was discipline. I told myself I needed more structure, more willpower, better habits, a stronger personality. I downloaded productivity apps, I bought planners, I made lists, very detailed lists, lists that had sub-lists, lists that required their own planning session. For a brief moment, it worked. I felt capable, focused, optimistic, like a new version of me had finally arrived. Then the system stopped working, and instead of questioning the system, I questioned myself. Again. Because no one told me that ADHD brains do not thrive on static systems. They thrive on novelty, on interest, on stimulation, on momentum, on things that are engaging enough to hold attention without force. So when the planner stopped working, I did not think, this system is not compatible with my brain. I thought, here we go again. I failed. That is the thing about being labeled lazy. Once the label sticks, everything becomes evidence. Miss a deadline? Lazy. Forget an appointment? Lazy. Struggle to start something you genuinely care about? Extremely lazy, apparently. From the outside, ADHD does not look like effort. It looks like inconsistency. One day you are hyper-focused, productive, creative, doing the work of several people at once. The next day, replying to a single message feels like it requires emotional preparation, strategic timing, a snack, and possibly a nap. So people assume you choose when to care. They do not see the invisible effort. They do not see the constant mental negotiation. They do not see how much energy it takes just to begin something boring. And eventually you stop seeing it too. You start believing that if you can do amazing things sometimes, then your inability to do basic things other times must be a personal flaw. It is not. It is neurological. One of the biggest lies many of us grew up with is that motivation comes from importance. That if something matters, you will do it. And if you do not do it, it must not matter enough. ADHD brains laugh gently at this idea. They run on interest, novelty, urgency, and emotional engagement. Importance alone does nothing. You can care deeply about something and still feel completely blocked from starting. You can want something intensely and still feel frozen, overwhelmed, or inexplicably tired the moment you try to begin. This is why ADHD procrastination feels so awful. It is not avoidance. It is not rebellion. It is not indifference. It is paralysis. You think about starting constantly. You plan to start. You rehearse starting. You imagine yourself starting very successfully, and yet when the moment comes, your brain reacts as if you have been asked to lift something impossibly heavy. So you wait, and while you wait, guilt builds. Guilt becomes background noise. Guilt becomes familiar. You carry it into rest. You carry it into weekends. You carry it even when you're doing something enjoyable, because part of your brain is always whispering that you should be doing something else. If you have ADHD, there is a strong chance you tried to fix this by becoming aggressively organized. You tried planners, timers, apps, systems, color-coded methods that worked beautifully for a short period of time and then disappeared from your life as if they were embarrassed to be associated with you. You told yourself, "This time is different." And for a moment, it was. Then novelty wore off. Motivation vanished. The system collapsed. Not because you failed, but because ADHD brains do not respond well to routines that never change. They need flexibility. They need stimulation. They need novelty built into the structure. Instead of being taught this, you learned to perform productivity. You learned how to look busy, how to apologize convincingly, how to explain delays in ways that sounded responsible. You learned how to promise improvement while quietly wondering why this felt so much harder for you than for everyone else. From the outside, it looked like laziness. From the inside, it felt like constantly running uphill while being told you were not trying hard enough. One of the most misunderstood parts of ADHD is task initiation. People assume starting is easy. For ADHD brains, it is often the hardest part. You can understand the task. You can know exactly how to do it. You might even want to do it. But starting feels like pushing against an invisible wall. This is why ADHD brains rely on urgency. Deadlines create dopamine. Pressure creates focus. Suddenly, everything works. Suddenly, you are productive. Suddenly, you can do in a few hours what felt impossible for days. And everyone asks the same question. Why didn't you just do this earlier? You ask yourself that too. Living for years under the belief that you are lazy takes a serious emotional toll. You become hyper-aware of your failures and blind to your effort. You minimize your strengths and magnify your struggles. You feel shame around rest, even when you are exhausted. You treat burnout like a personal flaw instead of a warning sign. Because ADHD often comes with emotional sensitivity, criticism lands deeply. Even gentle feedback can feel like confirmation of your worst fear, that you are not trying hard enough, that everyone else sees what you secretly believe about yourself. So you push harder. You normalize exhaustion. You tell yourself, this is just how life feels. You collapse only when you have nothing left. You convince yourself that rest must be earned, even though you are already running on empty. That is not laziness. That is survival. For many people, discovering ADHD is not dramatic. It is a slow realization. You hear someone describe executive dysfunction and something clicks. You learn about dopamine regulation, and suddenly your past rearranges itself. You realize your brain was never broken, it was just wired differently. And suddenly, your life makes sense. The unfinished projects, the emotional exhaustion, the bursts of brilliance followed by long stretches of nothing. You were not lazy. You were navigating a world that was not designed for how your brain works. Understanding ADHD does not magically fix everything. Tasks do not suddenly become easy. Focus does not become automatic. You still forget things. You still procrastinate. You still have days where your brain feels completely unavailable. But the story changes. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" you start asking, "What does my brain need?" You stop forcing productivity and start building support. You work with interest instead of against it. You understand that rest is not a reward, it is maintenance. You also realize that consistency is not the only measure of competence. Creativity, adaptability, insight, deep focus on meaningful work. These were never weaknesses. They were strengths hiding in a system that did not know what to do with them. And humor becomes essential, because sometimes the only way to survive the chaos is to laugh at it. You laugh at forgetting why you walked into a room. You laugh at the notebooks with 2 pages written in each. You laugh at the way your brain remembers a random moment from years ago, but not where you put your keys 5 minutes earlier. The humor is not denial. It is resilience. The truth is simple. Laziness is about not caring. ADHD is often the opposite. It is caring deeply, feeling intensely, and burning out because your brain regulates effort differently. If you were lazy, you would not feel this much guilt. If you were lazy, you would not be this exhausted. If you were lazy, you would not be trying this hard to understand yourself. And here's the part no one really talks about. When you grow up believing you are lazy, you do not just struggle with tasks. You struggle with trust, especially trust in yourself. You stop believing your own intentions. You stop trusting your own energy. Every burst of motivation feels suspicious, like it might disappear at any moment, because historically, it usually has. So even on good days, there is tension. You finally feel focused, productive, alive, and part of your brain whispers, "Enjoy it while it lasts." Because experience has taught you that this state is temporary. You know that tomorrow might feel completely different, and that uncertainty is exhausting. This is why people with ADHD often live in extremes, all in or completely stuck, hyper-focused or mentally offline, overcommitted or avoiding everything. There is rarely a comfortable middle ground. And this creates a strange emotional paradox. You are told you are lazy, but you are also told you are too intense, too much, too passionate, too scattered, too sensitive. Somehow, you are both not doing enough and doing too much at the same time, which is honestly impressive when you think about it. You start doubting your ability to set goals because you have watched yourself care deeply and still struggle to follow through. You hesitate to make promises, not because you do not want to keep them, but because you have learned how painful it feels to break them unintentionally. So you shrink your expectations. You lower the bar, not because you lack ambition, but because disappointment hurts too much. You tell yourself you are fine with less. You say things like, "I just work better under pressure," or "I am just not a routine person," without realizing that what you are really doing is protecting yourself from another round of self-blame. And then there is the constant mental noise, the running commentary, the internal reminders, the half-finished thoughts stacked on top of each other like browser tabs you swear you will get back to. Your brain is never quiet. It is either racing or stalled, planning or replaying, imagining future success or revisiting past mistakes in high definition. And when you finally sit down to rest, your mind decides that now is the perfect time to remember something embarrassing from a decade ago. Naturally. This is why rest feels complicated. Even when you stop moving, your brain does not. So people assume you are lazy because they see you sitting still, not realizing that internally you are running a full marathon while lying on the couch. You are not resting. You are buffering. And despite all of this, you keep trying. You keep showing up. You keep caring. You keep looking for answers, which is the most important detail people miss. Lazy people do not research productivity. Lazy people do not feel guilty about rest. Lazy people do not watch long videos trying to understand why life feels harder for them than it seems to for everyone else. You are not lazy. You are someone who has been working twice as hard to meet expectations that were never designed with your brain in mind. And when you finally learn that, when the pieces click into place, something subtle but powerful happens. The shame starts to loosen its grip. You stop narrating your life through failure. You begin noticing patterns instead of flaws. You replace "what is wrong with me" with "what helps me." That shift changes everything. You stop trying to become a different person and start learning how to support the one you already are. You build systems that flex instead of punish. You give yourself permission to work in bursts. You rest without negotiating your worth. You recognize that your brain does not need to be fixed. It needs to be understood. And slowly, the word lazy loses its power. It stops defining you. It stops explaining you. It stops haunting every unfinished task. Because now you know the truth. If this story feels familiar, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. More stories like this are coming. And in the comments, tell us where you are watching from and whether you were ever called lazy when you were actually struggling. Realizing you were never lazy does not erase the past, but it softens it. It allows you to forgive the version of yourself who did their best without an instruction manual. It allows you to rest without shame. It allows you to build a life that fits your brain instead of constantly fighting it. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are just misunderstood. And now, finally, you get to understand yourself.